This is Nick with logosbynick.com, and in today's tutorial I'll be demonstrating how you can create this very simple logo design using Inkscape with a couple of pencils here in the center and a timestamp for the year. So at any point in this tutorial you could look down at the bottom left hand side of my screen to see which mouse clicks and keystrokes I'm using. So we'll minimize this and get started here at Inkscape. By the way, if you'd like to know how you can make Inkscape appear dark and with these custom icons, a link to that information will be in the description of the video. So the first thing I want to do is make sure the view is set to custom and then zoom in at 1:1. Then we'll open up the edit objects, colors, gradients, and stroke menu, which is, we'll open up the align and distribute menu first, which is right here. Align and distribute objects. We're going to want last selected chosen from that drop down. And then we'll open up the edit objects, colors, gradients, and stroke menu with that right there. So the first thing we're going to create is the pencils here, like the crossing pencils. So to do that, I'm going to grab the squares and rectangles tool, and I'm just going to create a rectangle about that width and that height. Once we've done that, we'll go to the select tool, and you can see this is the width right here and the height. This is about 76 by 353. I'll just round this up. I'll just make this 75, and I'll hit tab to skip over, and I'll just make this 350 and hit enter. So we got 75 by 350. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give this an outline. I'm going to turn off the fill by clicking the X right here. And then I'm going to hold shift and click on the black, the color black right next to it. And that's going to give it an outline. And after that, I'm going to come over here to the stroke style tab. I'm going to change this outline, whatever this is, just change this to say maybe 5. Actually, no, we're going to go a little bigger than that. Let's try 15. Okay, that might work. So we'll do 15 for now. And we're going to give this a rounded join and a rounded cap. And then we're going to come up here to where it says snap to cusp nodes, and we're going to turn that button on, the snap to cusp nodes. So what I'm going to do now is duplicate this object by right clicking that and going to duplicate. And I'll hold control and move this off to the right. And then I'll click on it again to get the rotation handles. And what I'm looking for right here is these sliding handles on the side. So I'm going to hold control on the keyboard and take this right arrow and slide that up a few steps. So I'll go 1, 2, maybe 2 steps. That's good like that. Then we'll take this corner right here and snap it onto that corner. So we'll just click and drag over there to snap that onto that corner. And now I'm going to duplicate that object by right-clicking that and going to duplicate. And I'll flip that horizontally with that button there. And again, I'll just come and snap this to this corner over here. So you notice the shape, the pencil is starting to take shape. So what I'm going to do is create the tip now. So I'll come over here to the Bezier pen, which is right here. Or you could just press B on the keyboard. Snap the cursor onto this corner and click. And bring that line over here and snap it onto this corner and click. And then hit enter to create a line. And we're going to want that line to be the same size that these other lines are. So we'll just come over to the width, the stroke style width. Change that to 5, hit enter. I don't know why that's not changing. Actually, no, it wasn't 5, it was 15. That's right, 15. And then we'll give that a rounded join and a rounded cap. And what I want to do now is come over here to the Edit Paths by Nodes tool and click and drag over both of those nodes of that line right there. And click the button up here to the far left that says Insert New Nodes into Selected Segments. That's going to give us a new point that we can use right there. So we'll just click on that point right there. Just click on that just to select that. And then hold control on the keyboard and just click and drag that up about that far. So you have the tip of the pencil. So I'm going to have make this a little bit longer actually. So to do that, let's go back to the select tool. Click and drag over all of this. And let's first make sure it's a path. So we'll go to Path, Object to Path. And then with them all selected still, we'll go to the Edit Paths by Nodes tool. And I'm going to click and drag over these nodes here on the bottom to select them all. And by the way, I'm moving the page around by pressing down the mouse wheel and moving the mouse. So with those nodes selected, I'm just going to hold control and grab one of them and pull them down about that far. I'd say that's pretty good. And what I'm going to do now is I'll go back to the select tool. And I should have everything selected still, yes. With everything still selected, make sure you have this button turned off right here. Where it says Effect, the very first one on the left, we want that, make sure that's turned off, what we're going to do next. So we're going to scale this down. So we're going to hold Control and Shift on the keyboard and click and drag to scale this down. And if you notice, it's going to appear thicker because the lines, they stay at that 15-point stroke. So I'm just going to hold Control and Shift and scale it down a little more. We want it to be pretty thick. We want thick lines without them being too thick, because once they get too thick, you really can't see what's going on in there. So a good size, maybe about that much. That's pretty good. Maybe a little more. And that's pretty good. And once you've gotten it about that far, we could finalize all of that by going to Path, Stroke to Path, and then Path, Union. And then I'm going to go to the Select tool, and I'm going to click on this again to get the rotation handles. And I'm just going to hold Control on the keyboard and rotate this around 1, 2, 3 steps like that. And then I'll right-click that and go to Duplicate. And I'll flip that horizontally with that button there. And we're going to have the second pencil there. So if you notice, we have one going over the other. We're going to have to erase the space inside of the one behind it. So with that still selected, we're going to duplicate it. But instead of right-clicking it, just hit Control-D on the keyboard to duplicate it. Oops. Control-D. And then go to Path, Break Apart, Path, Union. And then hold Shift and click on the pencil behind it. And go to Path, Difference. And what we could do now is click and drag over both of those and go to Path, Union. Let me bring the opacity of that up. I don't know why that's at 92. And there we have our pencil right there at a 15-point stroke. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create the object going around it. And we want the thickness of all these lines to be the same thickness as the pencil line. So everything we construct around this has to remain a 15-point stroke. So I'm going to grab the Squares and Rectangles tool. And I'll just hold Control and Shift in the keyboard and click and drag to create a perfect square like that. I'll grab the Select tool and put this over here. And we could let this one have a square join. And a square cap. And I'm just going to hold Control, actually Shift. I'll hold Shift and then click on the pencils and center it on the vertical and horizontal axis. And click off of it to deselect everything. And then we can click on just the square. I'm just going to hold Control and Shift and scale that in a little more until it encases the pencil nicely. We don't want too much open space there in the edges. And what we're going to do now is convert this to a path by going to Path, Object to Path. And then we'll go to the Edit Paths by Nodes tool and click and drag over these two bottom nodes right here. And click this button up here to the far left that says Insert New Nodes into Selected Segments. And that's going to put a new node in there. And we can click on just that node and then hold Control and click and drag it down to about there. Like that. So what we'll do now is we'll go to the Select tool. I'll right click that and go to Duplicate. And I'm going to turn this red. And I'm going to get rid of the black outline by holding Shift and clicking on the X. And then I'll flip this vertically. Flip selected objects vertically. And bring the opacity of this down about in half. And then I'm just going to hold Control on the keyboard and click and drag this down to about here. We want that down there about that much. If you notice, this is the part right here where it's like a little bit of a black tip and there's a star inside of there. That's what we're creating now. So once I have it down to there, that's pretty good. I'll click on our original upside down house shape, duplicate that by hitting Control-D, then hold Shift and click on the red shape and go to Path, Intersection. And then we can bring the opacity of that all the way up, make that black. And now we can create our star. So let's come over here to the Stars and Polygons tool. Click on that. And from up here in the toolbar, we're going to want star selected. Corners, we want 5 corners. Spoke ratio, 0.375. And then rounded, set at 0. And randomize, also set at 0. And those are the parameters of a 5-point star. Then we could just hold Control and Shift and click and drag to create a star like that. I'll go to the Select tool. Let me click on this again to get the rotation handles. I'm just going to rotate this around until it's sitting upright like that. That's pretty good. And then I'll just put this on top of here. I'm just going to make this white. Click on it again to get back to the scaling handles. And I'll just hold Control and Shift and scale that down until it's at an appropriate size. Put that right about there, and then hold Shift and click on the outside object and just make sure it's centered on the vertical axis, like that. And we can click off it to deselect everything. So the next step is to create these little wings here, these little tails with the year on it. So to do that, just grab the Squares and Rectangles tool, Click and drag to create a rectangle. It's going to be white. You're not going to really be able to see it. So that's all right. We're going to turn the fill off by clicking on the X. And then hold Shift and click on the color black to give it an outline. And it should default back to 15 points. If it doesn't say 15 pixel stroke, then just go ahead and type that in. And with that, I'm going to convert that to a path by going to Path, Object to Path. And I'll go to the Select tool, and I want to grab this corner up here to the top right and snap it onto this corner. And then hold Shift and click on the pencils. And click the button that says Center on Horizontal Axis. And click off it to deselect everything. So what I'm going to do now is click on just this rectangle. Go to the Edit Paths by Nodes tool. Click and drag over those two nodes on the left. And click the button right here that says Insert New Nodes into Selected Segments. And click on just that node. And then hold Control and just click and drag that in about that much. And actually I'm going to take those three nodes right there. I'm just going to hold Control and move them in about that much. And that's pretty good. And if you notice, I have a couple of little bit of like an accent line on each side. So to do that, to create that, I'm just going to grab the Bezier pen, which is right here, or you can just press B on the keyboard. And I'm just going to start right up here and click, hold Control, click and drag it straight through, click again, and then hit Enter, and there's our line. We're going to want to change the width of that to 15. And we'll go back to the Select tool. I'm going to put this up here, right about there. And I'm going to convert that to a path by going to Path, Stroke to Path. And then I'll right click that and go to Duplicate and hold Control and just move this down to about here. And what I'll do now is I'll hold Shift and click on the other line and unify them both together by going to Path, Union. And then I'll hold Shift and click on the little box beneath it and center it on the horizontal axis. And it looks like it already is. So let's click off of that to deselect everything. And I'll click on just this box right here. Right click that and go to Duplicate. And then hold Shift and click on the lines and go to Path, Intersection. And what we can do now is click and drag over all of that right there and duplicate that by hitting Control D. And we're going to group that together with this button up here, Group Selected Objects. And then we're going to flip it horizontally with that button. And again, I'm going to move this up here and snap this onto that top right corner. And then hold Shift and click on the pencils and make sure that's centered on the horizontal axis. And then we can click off of that to deselect everything. So now what I'm going to do is put the text in there. So to do that, it's pretty simple. I'm just going to grab the text tool, click on the canvas to get the cursor blinking, and just type 20. Go up here to the text editor and choose my font. I'm going to use League Gothic for this. Click OK. Close out of that. And we'll go back to the Select tool. And I'll hold Control and Shift and scale that up. Put this right inside there like that. And I'll hold Shift and click on the object and just make sure it's centered on the horizontal axis. Click off it to deselect. I'm just going to move this over a little bit. Then I'll right click that and go to Duplicate. Hold Control and move this off to the right. Go back to the text tool up here and just type in 20, right in 17 actually. Go back to the Select tool. I'm just going to move that in a little more like that. That's pretty good. And what we want to do now is let's click off of that to deselect everything. Let's click and drag over the entire thing. And let's click Ungroup to make sure everything's ungrouped. I'm actually going to click it a few times. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hold Shift and click on this set of numbers to deselect it, and then this set of numbers to deselect that, and then this star to deselect that. And with all of that selected, I'm going to go to Path, Stroke to Path, and then Path, Union. And then I'll hold Shift and click on the star right there and go to Path, Difference. And what we could do is click and drag over this entire thing and group it together, and then hold Control and Shift and scale it down about that much. So we have that part of the logo done. All we have to do now is put some text going around the outside. So to do that, let's start out with a circle. We'll go to the Circles and Ellipses tool. Hold Control and Shift and click and drag to create a perfectly round circle like that. I'm going to make that red. Get rid of the outline by holding Shift and clicking on the X. Bring the opacity of that down in half. Go back to the Select tool, hold Shift, click on the logo, center it on the vertical and horizontal axis. Click off of it to deselect everything, and then take just the circle right here and hold Control and Shift and scale that in about that much. I'm just actually going to hold Control and slide this up a little bit. And that's pretty good. And what I'll do now is I'll turn off the Snap to Cusp nodes. We don't need that anymore. And for this tutorial, I just wrote around the top logo design with Inkscape. So I'll just type that in again. I'll go to the text tool, click on the canvas, turn on the caps lock, logo design. Go back to the Select tool, right click that and go to duplicate, and then hold Control and click and drag this down here. Go back to the text tool and just highlight that right with Inkscape. This is going to be the text on the top, this is going to be the text on the bottom, so we have to have them as separate objects. Go back to the Select tool, click and drag over both of those to select them both, and we'll go to the text editor and choose whichever font you'd like. I'm going to use League Gothic here. Click OK. Close out of that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this up here. I'm just going to try to eyeball what a good size for this text would be compared to the logo. So I'm just going to hold Control and just scale that down a little bit because it looks a little too big in comparison to the rest of the logo. So that's pretty good right there. I'm going to move this over here. I'll go back to the text tool, and if you notice I have the letters spaced out. So actually, you know what? I'll do that after we put it on the circle. So let's go back to the Select tool. Click off of that to deselect everything. Take this red circle, let's send that to the bottom, lower selection to the bottom, and click on the word logo design, and then hold Shift and click on the red circle, and go to text, put on path, and then click off of that to deselect everything. Then I'll click on just the red circle, click on it again to get the rotation handles, and just rotate this around about that much. And then I'll grab the text tool and click on the word to get that cursor blinking in there. And then I'm going to come up here where it says spacing between letters. I'm just going to hold up that arrow until it's spaced out about that much. That's pretty good. We'll go back to the Select tool, click on this circle and click on it again to get the rotation handles and just rotate it around until it looks like it's sitting even. If you'd like to be precise with it, you can come up here to where this these little measurement increments are and click and drag and pull down. It pulls down a horizontal guide. And you could actually see where the base of the N is versus where the base of the L is. And you could just get a pretty good sense of where that should be. And that's pretty good how it is. I'll leave that just like that. And what I'll do now is I'll click on the word logo design and finalize that by going to Path, Object to Path. And what I want to do now is take the red circle and hold Control and Shift and scale it up until it's enveloping, it's like enveloping the word logo design up there. Like that. About that much. That's pretty good. Then I'll take the words with Inkscape, hold Shift, click on the red circle, and go to Text, put on Path. And I'll click off of that to deselect everything. We want this text to be going on the inside of the circle, not on the outside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the circle and just click the button that says Flip Selected Objects Horizontally, and that'll put it on the inside. Let me click it again to get the rotation handles and just rotate this down here. That's pretty good. And I'll click on just the text. We'll go to the text tool. Spacing between letters. We're going to hold up that arrow again to space them out. And that's pretty good. And I'll go back to the Select tool. I'm going to take this guide and I'm going to put this down here so I can eyeball. It actually looks like it's pretty, yeah, that's as it is right now. It's pretty even. So click off that to deselect everything. Click on just the text and then go to Path, Object to Path. Click off of that to deselect everything. And I'm just going to hover over the guide here. Hover the cursor over the guide until it turns red and then press delete on the keyboard to get rid of it. So what I'll do now is I'll take this red circle, final step here, and I'm going to turn off the fill color and give that a black outline by holding Shift and clicking on the color black. Bring the opacity of that up. I'm going to change the width of this to maybe like 3. Or maybe 4. That's pretty good. And I'll just hold Control and Shift and scale it down until it's going halfway, about halfway between the letters right there like that. That's pretty good. And we'll click on the button that says Rounded Join and Rounded Cap. And what we want to do now is exclude just these two segments right here going between this text like you saw I did here. So To do that, I'm going to create a square by going to squares and rectangles and holding Control and Shift. Create a square like that, turn it red, get rid of the black outline by holding Shift and clicking the X. And I'll bring the opacity of that down about in half. I'll go back to the Select tool, click on it again to get the rotation handles, and just hold Control and rotate it around until the corners are sitting vertically and horizontally like that. And I'll just put this right about here. Let me click on it again to get the scaling handles. Scale that down a little bit. And maybe put that right about there like that. The area where the red and the black intersect is going to make for the line that we end up with right here, like these two lines on the side. So just try to position it where you think it would look good. If you'd like to zoom in and out, you could press plus and minus on the keyboard, or you could just hold Control on the keyboard and roll up and down on the mouse wheel like I'm doing. So once we've done that, let's right-click that and go to Duplicate and hold Control and move this one over here to about, I'd say about almost the same position. And then we could hold Shift and click on the other red square and go to Path, Union. Then we could hold Shift and click on the black ring and make sure it's centered on the vertical axis, which it looks like it is. And then we'll go to Path, Cut Path. And we can click off of that to deselect everything. And now this should all be cut into certain different segments. So I can take this top segment here, press delete on the keyboard to get rid of that, and take this bottom segment, press delete on the keyboard to get rid of that, and then click on this segment, and then hold Shift and click on the other segment, and we'll convert those to paths by going to Path, Stroke to Path. Let me press 1 on the keyboard to zoom back out to 100%. And as you can see, we are finished. We have created our logo design with Inkscape. So if you have any questions, let me know. And as always, thank you for watching.